Hey, welcome back to Keen Reads. My name is Jared, and today we're going to be doing part 3 of my bookshelf tour. So this is going to be late 1800s through mid 20th century, like 1940s, 1950s. But I do have 2 books that I accidentally skipped on my last bookshelf tour. I don't know why I did it, so they're a little out of order. But we have The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, and then North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have read North and South. I've read part of this, but not the whole thing. So getting into today's video, I do have my various things on top. We have 2 more sloths. I lived in Houston for a year while I was completing my oncology training. So my mom got me this cactus because I guess she thought there were cactuses in Houston, but I never saw one. Some various, a signed Matthew McConaughey headshot, Just Keep Living. Random cards. And then here's a book, another sloth book that my mother got me. I'm Not a Sleepy Sloth. Again, my mom thinks I'm obsessed with sloths, and I just go with it. They just fell on the floor. And then we have a stuffed Totoro from my neighbor Totoro. One of my friends from pharmacy school got me this from Japan, actually. Let's talk about the books, though. So starting off, we have the rest of my Mark Twain. So we have Huckleberry Finn, The Gilded Age, The American Clement, Pudd'nhead Wilson, and Tom Sawyer. As I mentioned last time, the only thing I've read by Mark Twain is the first Tom Sawyer novel. For the rest of this shelf, I'm probably going to just point out books that I haven't read because I think I've read the majority of this shelf. There's probably like 3 to 5 books on each shelf that I have not read, or each shelf of this bookshelf that I have not read. So let's get started. We have Germinal by Emile Zola, about a coal mining town. Whoops, just butchered the cover. We have my Thomas Hardy, Jude the Obscure, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and then Far from the Madding Crowd. I would probably say Jude the Obscure was my favorite of these 3. Then we move into Henry James. I have 3 Henry James novels. I have only read one of them. So I have Wings of the Dove, The Ambassadors, and then What Maisie Knew. So What Maisie Knew is the only one that I have read. I have listened to a couple of his short stories on audiobook, and his writing style is intimidating. They call him the master for a reason. But looking forward to reading The Ambassadors. I don't really know much about The Wings of the Dove. We have The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This is the copy I read in high school. We have Robert Louis Stevenson collection. So this has Treasure Island and Kidnapped in it. The Complete Works of Arthur Rimbaud, as translated by Paul Schmidt, one of my favorite poets. I distinctly remember reading this on a spur-of-the-moment trip to Tampa Bay that me and my best friends took in pharmacy school. We have my Oscar Wildes. So we have The Importance of Being Earnest, Beautiful and Impossible Things, which is just a collection of his essays, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and then De Profundis and Other Writings, which is, again, just another collection of essays. We have Pan and Hunger by Newt Hampson. Kind of a bad dude, but he has some good books. Selected Poems, or the Collected Poems of A.E. Housman. And then Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. We finished this shelf with my Chekhov. I have only read the short stories of Chekhov, so this is Ward number 6 and Other Stories. It didn't really click with me the first time I read it. So I think I'm going to reread this before I delve into the complete short novels and then the plays of Anton Chekhov. All right, moving on to the next shelf, we have selected poems and plays by W.B. Yeats. One of my favorite poems is The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats, which I believe is in this collection. I marked a lot of his poems, so I'm not going to try to find it right now. We have my H.G. Wells, of which I have read only these two. So I have read The Time Machine and Invisible Man. Sorry about the reflection. The Island of Dr. Moreau I have not read. And War of the Worlds I have not read. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Have not read this, although Phantom of the Opera is one of my favorite plays. I've seen it in person, I think 3 times, and then I just love the movie. Then we have my Proust, In Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time. As I mentioned in a previous video, I have read the first 3 volumes. I have not read 4, 5, 6, or 7, but they're on my list to read this year. Selected Writings of Gertrude Stein. I've never read anything by Gertrude Stein, and I don't know if I'm going to read from this volume. It's just so long, and I'd rather get individual versions, I think, of her individual works. So I might end up just getting rid of this if I can find copies of her individual novels and essays and things. My 2 W. Somerset Maugham. I also have The Moon and Sixpence, as we saw in the first video. But this is The Razor's Edge, which was the first that I had read, and then Of Human Bondage. Next we have my Rilke collection. So we have the Duono Elegies, Letters to a Young Poet, which is the first collection, or the first thing I've read by him. Book of Hours. And then, as we saw in the last video, Sonnets to Orpheus. Finishing off this shelf, we have the start of my Thomas Mann collection, with the 2 novels by him that I have not read. So we have Buddenbrooks, which I believe was his first major work. I know they cite it in his Nobel Prize paragraph. They cite Buddenbrooks. And then we have a behemoth here, which is multiple novels in 1 volume, which is Joseph and His Brothers. This would qualify as a mammoth book for this year, but I think it was just too long to combine with all the other books. It's like 1,500 pages. All right, so moving to the next shelf, I have to get down on my knees, but we have the rest of my Thomas Mann. Here we have a really nice copy of The Magic Mountain. I got this for like $15 when I was in Houston. There are pictures in it. I'm not going to be able to find one now because I'm on camera. Just kidding. So there's like these kind of stencil-like drawings in them. I've heard a lot of really good things about The Magic Mountain. It seems like a lot of people really like it. I wasn't blown away by it. I liked Death in Venice and his short stories a lot better. This book has a lot of sentimental value to me, so Call of the Wild. Not only does Jack London have some really beautiful passages in here, I'm thinking about doing a video where I kind of go through some of my favorite book passages. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. But this was also, even though it's kind of violent, the only book that my dad read to me as a kid was Call of the Wild. It's his favorite book. So this is Call of the Wild. This is the copy he used to read to me. And it also has some of his other short stories in it. We have Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. Siddhartha and Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. Next we go into my Joyce. So we have Dubliners. A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. As you can see, I marked a lot in that volume. We have Ulysses, which I haven't read, but I'm planning on reading in June of this year. And then we have Finnegan's Wake, which I'll probably never read. Then we have my Virginia Woolf. I've read everything that I have by her. So we have Orlando, A Room of One's Own. A Room of One's Own was the first thing I'd read by her. Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, and then The Waves. After that, we have my Kafka collection. I believe I have all of Kafka's fiction here, as well as his diaries. I think the only things I don't have are his aphorisms and his letters. But we have The Castle. This is his complete shorter works. It also includes the Metamorphosis in here. His diaries. Another copy of the Metamorphosis. This is the one that I read. The Trial and America. Selected Poems by William Carlos Williams. There was a couple in here that stood out to me that I liked. And then Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. I really did enjoy this one, which is why I picked up quite a bit of D.H. Lawrence at that book sale a couple months ago. Lastly, on this shelf, we have a tribute to Freud by H.D. and then collected poems from 1912 to 1944 by H.D. I have not read any H.D. I had actually never heard of her until there was a podcast episode about her on the history of literature, and she sounded interesting, so I picked these up. Next shelf down, we have The Story of Dr. Dolittle. I have not read this. Not really much to say about it. A really cool looking copy of The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. I read this last year by reading kind of like a passage or two every night before going to sleep. Selected Poems by T.S. Eliot. The Master and the Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Really wasn't a fan of this when I read it. I feel like it probably just needs a reread. Then we have let me get down a little bit, my J.R.R. Tolkien. So we have, first of all, we have The Hobbit in Italian that my friend got me from Italy. The Hobbit in English. Fellowship of the Ring. The Silmarillion. And then The Two Towers and The Return of the King. I'm not a big fan of movie covers, but I don't really plan on rereading these, I don't think. So I'm just kind of sticking with the movie covers. Let me get a little more comfortable. All right. The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. I have not read this. Selected Poems by E.E. Cummins. Again, E.E. Cummins is one of my favorite poets. I really like this volume. Collected Stories of Isaac Babel. Another kind of 20th century Russian author that I was not a huge fan of. Journey to the End of Night by Celine. I think his first name is Ferdinand. Yeah, Louis Ferdinand. We have I, Claudius, and Claudius the God by Robert Graves. The Great Gatsby, one of my favorite books by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Here is The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Have not read this, and I do have a different copy of it, which I had in the first bookshelf tour video. I'm slowly trying to replace my mass market paper books with trade paperbacks. So I'll probably end up getting rid of this one when I read the new one. My Faulkner that I have read, which is The Sound and the Fury, and A Light in August. Faulkner is one of those authors that he's really difficult to read, and I don't think I really enjoy it a ton, but it feels rewarding when I finish it. We have the start of my C.S. Lewis collection. So we have Till We Have Faces, which is a retelling of the Cupid and Psyche myth, which is probably my favorite of his works. Surprised by Joy. Miracles, which is the only work of him that I own that I have not read. The Screwtape Letters. And then The Four Loves. Moving down one more shelf, we have the remainder of my C.S. Lewis, which, for some reason, the Chronicles of Narnia are not in order. So let me put these in order, but we have The Magician's Nephew, and these are ordered by theme, I guess, or by, not publication date, but I guess chronologically within the universe. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is actually published first. The Horse and His Boy. Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Whoops. Prince Caspian comes next, then Voyage. The Silver Chair, and then The Last Battle. Unlike Lord of the Rings, I probably will reread these at some point. And then the last of my C.S. Lewis, we have Mere Christianity and The Great Divorce. Then we move into my Hemingway. So we have all of which I've read but one. So we have, just rip the cover. For Whom the Bell Tolls, The Old Man in the Sea, The Sun Also Rises, which is my favorite book by him. I actually have a poster on my wall of the Matador that is made out of the entire text of this novel. Maybe I'll show that at the end of the video. Men Without Women. The Garden of Eden, which is the only book by him that I have not read. Well, that I own, that I haven't read. A Farewell to Arms, which was the first Hemingway I read. In Our Time. I have 2 copies of Immovable Feasts. This is the one that I read. And then we have this copy, which is like a book club edition, but I thought it looked really nice, even though it's a little beat up. And then lastly, we have The Snows of Kilimanjaro. After Hemingway, we have the collected fictions of Jorge Luis Borges. Really loved this. Definitely going to reread this at some point. Lolita and Speak Memory by Vladimir Nabokov. I do have more Nabokov in my nonfiction shelf. I have his essays. And then we go into my Steinbeck. I have read all of the Steinbeck that's here. The only Steinbeck I haven't read I went over in my first video, which is The Winter of Our Discontent and In Dubious Battle. So we have East of Eden, which is probably my favorite book by him. The Grapes of Wrath. The Moon is Down. Tortilla Flat. Cannery Row. The Pearl. Travels with Charlie. The Red Pony. And Of Mice and Men. Next we have George Orwell's 1984. And then we get into my Graham Greene, who is slowly becoming one of my favorite authors. We start with my favorite book by him, which is probably one of my favorite books that I've read, and that's The Heart of the Matter. So we can't really see the bottom of the shelf here. You can just see the top halves, but I'm going to bring the books up for you. So we have the rest of my Graham Greene. The End of the Affair. Power and the Glory. And Brighton Rock. I also want to read The Quiet American. And then I'll probably end up reading a lot more about him. The Poetry of Pablo Neruda. I've read probably a third of this. And as you can see, I've marked a few poems that stood out to me. You've seen this collection a few times, but this is the selected works of Samuel Beckett. It's selected because it's only the works that he translated himself into English. If he left them in French, then it was not included in this volume. Volumes 1 and 2 are his novels, Volumes 3 were his dramatic works, and Volume 4 is his essays and things like that, criticism. Next we get to the first sci-fi that I own. Actually, we already had H.G. Wells, but we have Starship Troopers and Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. Selected Poems by W.H. Auden. Under the Volcano by Malcolm Lowry. I really struggled reading this last year. I had to reread each section quite a few times before I felt like I got it. And I probably really just need to reread the whole novel again. Lord of the Flies, which I read in high school. We have my Camus next. All of which that I have read. So Exile in the Kingdom. The Plague, which was probably my favorite thing that he's written that I've read. The Myth of Sisyphus. And The Stranger. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Death of a Salesman and The Crucible by Arthur Miller. And then we end with the start of my Saul Bellow. So Saul Bellow bleeds a little bit onto my next shelf, but we have Herzog, Henderson the Rain King, Seize the Day, and The Adventures of Augie March. Saul Bellow is another one of my favorite authors. So that's what we got. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next week with the second to last part of our bookshelf tour. Lastly, as promised, I just want to show you my poster. So this is supposedly, sometimes I doubt it because I haven't read it, the entire novel, The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, from the start all the way through Isn't It Pretty to Think So? And then we have Callie. All right, see you guys later.